evening.
Gosh, we're not even to May yet. I can only get 3 people to say good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Much better, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Mullen. I'm Vice Chancellor and Dean for Academic and Student Affairs. And it's my pleasure to open this session up this evening. I want to acknowledge Alex Obiol, who is out scanning cards, and all of student government for really making this happen and then giving me the podium, if you will. But it's a pleasure to be here. This is a topic that is of great interest to students every year. This year has been a slightly strange year because we, as Adam Schmidt will tell you, we had a meeting that lasted 10 minutes because all we had to do was pass a resolution to not raise fees for the next year. So that was a pretty productive meeting, I thought. But anyway, so the purpose of this, every year we get into a situation where we get into September and August and September, and that's really when the fee approval process starts. And there's not really a whole lot of time to bring students up to speed on how the process works and on really what the fees are all about. So we thought maybe doing this town hall would at least give us an opportunity to start that conversation now. I believe we'll probably, in some way, shape, or form, continue the conversation in April after the elections, just so that folks know what we do and how we do it. So kudos to Adam and to Jess for really kind of pushing this idea and then for getting it to this point. I'm going to spend a few minutes as an overview just talking about tuition and fees in general. And if I lose my voice, I apologize. I'll talk a little bit about what the fees are, and I'll talk a little bit about what fees are versus what tuition is in terms of how we use the money. And then at the end, I'll spend a minute or two just kind of showing you the individual fees. And then we're going to have 5 different folks here this evening that will, actually 6 according to my slide, that will discuss the fee areas that are listed here. And these were areas that student government highlighted as the ones they would like to have someone give a very short overview on. And then towards the end, we're supposed to have some food. And there'll be opportunities to talk one-on-one with representatives from the fee areas. So that's kind of where we're headed to for the next 45 to 55 minutes. I'll be surprised if we're done by 7:45, but that's the goal. So let me talk a little bit. One thing I always like to do when I talk to students is to first set the stage by letting you know what the university's budget is and what are the big pools of money, and then generally speaking, how do we spend that money? And so I've got 2 slides that I want to show that kind of gives that overview. And these are from 2017, 2018, because that was last year, so it was a completed year. If you look at this particular slide, you can see that last year our budget was about $1.6 billion for the entire university. So this is a big operation. It's a huge operation. And of course, if you're familiar with our mission, you know that we do a lot of things in that $1.6 billion. If you look at where the money comes from, the state gave us $509 million last year, and contracts and grants, mostly research, another $340 million. Over here is your tuition and fees, $314 million last year, and about 28% of that is fees. So if you can do the math on that. So that's kind of the big pockets. We have sales and services, a variety of things, everything from Howling Cow ice cream to, I don't know. Rich, tell me more things that we sell, but we sell everything across the board in our C-stores as well as from our farms, and you just name it, it's there. And then a variety of other sources that you can see. So that's a $1.6 billion budget. Where do we spend that? Sometimes students will say, well, you're using my tuition dollars to fund research. And so what I want to show you here is that we spent last year about $486 million directly on instruction. A lot of that, most of that is your faculty's salaries, those kinds of things. And then we spent another $298 million on research, and public service, 141, institutional support, 486, auxiliary enterprises, housing, dining, well-rec, health, those kinds of things, You can see that 188, academic student support 125, and then financial aid and depreciation. The point I want to make here is that a couple of these areas, if you look at tuition, your tuition and fees was 314, and if you kind of lump some of these, you can get to a conservative estimate of about $611 million spent indirectly or directly on the academic enterprise here at NC State. So your tuition and fees aren't covering all of that. There's quite a bit of state money that's coming in on top of that as well. So I always like to put that into perspective. So about 50% is tuition and fees, and that really doesn't include some of these areas like student financial aid, institutional facilities and support. Obviously, some of that money goes directly into your classrooms and other areas. So that's the budget for the university. So let me switch gears because this is a fee town hall, and we'll talk quickly about fees. I've already used most of my time. So I just want to get down to what tuition is and what fees are. And you can go to the University of North Carolina System Office Policy Manual and find expanded definitions of these if you're interested. But tuition is just what it says. It's used to partially defray the costs of general academic and academic administrative operations of campuses. And so that's what your money is going into, as well as a lot of state appropriations. Fees, on the other hand, have always been set aside in North Carolina, and by the way, it varies from state to state how fees are defined. But in North Carolina, fees have been defined as used for limited dedicated purposes that are not to be used to defray the costs of general academic and administrative operations of campuses. So we're not funding the colleges, we're not funding the vast majority of the academic enterprise with fees. And then the area that's most of interest to students are these two categories here, because these are the ones that all students pay. General fees are in 4 big lumps. If you look at the University of North Carolina System Office, they'll basically look at fees in 4 lumps, and ours are subdivided within those. So they're basically athletic and recreation fees, health services fees, student activity fees, and educational and technology fees. And you're going to get a little more detail on many of those this evening. And then indebtedness fees. This building, $290 a year on your fee bill to help pay the bill on Tally Student Union, for instance, are applicable to all students as well, and basically stay in place as long as it takes to pay off the facility, which is typically 30 years. So those are tuition versus fees. So what is special about fee money? It's very different than state money. In this state, the chancellor has very little authority to keep money at the end of the year. Most all of the money that the state gives us and your tuition dollars, if there's money left over at the end of the year, the vast majority of that goes back to the state. And so on June 30th of 2019, any excess there will be gone, and it'll be reabsorbed by the state. The fee units are independent of that, and all of that money stays at NC State. And so it really is a very different kind of money, so we carry money over from year to year. It's also what we depend on when costs increase. So if it costs more to run Tally, or if it costs more to run counseling, or if it costs more to run transportation, the only source of revenue are fee funds. And that really comes into play when the state mandates raises, which they do fairly often, 2%, 3%, whatever it is. And they mandate everybody get a raise, but they don't give us the money except for the state appropriated side. So if a 3% raise on all personnel paid on state funds, they would give us that. We pull that out of our fees. Now we generally plan for that, but if we go a certain amount of time without fee increases in a particular area, that means we have to start looking at decreasing services when we're mandated to give raises. And as I said before, these are trust funds. We can carry them over, which is a good thing because we carry over reserves in housing and in well-rec and in health and a variety of other areas to account for emergency spending if something catastrophic happens. And the state, if we lose an appropriated building, they kind of look at us and, sorry, we can't figure out how to replace park shops with our money, figure it out campus. So that's kind of the way that works. So that's the nature of fee funds, and I'll be happy to answer questions about that later. I will show this slide as well. We may think that we're expensive at NC State, but we're not. And this slide shows on the left our peer institutions. So every university has a series of peers that we evaluate ourselves against. And as you can see, these are all land-grant universities, all with engineering, some with medical. In terms of our overall tuition plus fees hit, we're in the bottom third. If you look at tuition, we're second to the bottom. Fees are a little higher than most of our peers. I think we're fourth or fifth highest in fees, but when you mix the two together, we're still in the bottom third, bottom three of all these universities. Now that doesn't make that fee hit any less difficult, because we know graduate students who are on research stipends, they get paid for their work, and their grants pay for tuition, but oftentimes grants won't pay for fees. And so you're a grad student making $22,000 a year, and twice a year you're paying out $1,200 out of that $22K. So that's where the rub comes oftentimes for graduate students, and I understand that, having been a graduate student at NC State. And then just to show you where we're at relative to the entire UNC system, as you might guess, NC State and Chapel Hill are the two most expensive universities in the group, with in-state total fees for us $2,300. This was last year's data, not this year's data, and Chapel Hill's about $1,700. And if you look at the breakouts, you can see most of that is related to indebtedness. So we're carrying more debt fee than Chapel Hill is. But you can look down and see the variations. For instance, I'll just point out athletics. Our athletics fee is $232. What do you see for UNC Asheville? $830. And so small regional schools have a hard time figuring out where to get money. I've seen regional schools that are spending $1,400, $1,500, $1,800 in fee money around the country to support football and basketball because they don't have TV revenue. So the Power Five can keep their fees relatively low, and you see that here as well. So we're pretty competitive within the system. Several of the schools have higher total fees than we do, just because of the cost of doing business on a smaller campus. And so here are the fees by area for you. And we're not going to be able to talk about all of these, but if you just kind of peruse this, you'll see the magnitude of some of the fees versus others. The beloved Association of Student Government fee of $1, all the way up to that $160, no, it's not even more than that. It's the health fee of, where's it at? $407. And then the ETF fee of $439.28. So a couple of those will be talked about tonight. So the ones we're going to have speakers on will be transportation, student health, student center operations, wellness and recreation, and then educational and technology fees. So those will be the 5 areas that you'll get a little more information on. I'll be the last one with the ETF fee, and then we'll be able to split out and have a conversation with representatives from the fee areas. So at this point, I would like to ask Kathy Reeve to come on up and talk about transportation. Each speaker only has 10 minutes. So this is kind of it's almost speed dating. Thanks, Kathy.
I get 5 extra minutes for that. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mullen, and I want to thank the student government for inviting us and arranging this. I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint, and I'm going to let you know that what we have on our back table here with our staff is a replication of that PowerPoint. So if you don't get the numbers, you can go back there and get a closer look at them. Just real quick, I don't read slides. So this is who we are, what we do. There are 2 parts to us. There's parking and transportation. The transportation has several components in addition to Wolfline. We have carpool, vanpool, we have the Go Pass. How many have a Go Pass? Okay. And then we have the zip car. Who uses a zip car? Anybody on campus? Okay. And then the line bike. Who rides a scooter? One brave person admits it. Okay. So, as Dr. Mullen explained, we're totally receipt supported like many other departments here on campus. We have 2 sources of revenue. Those are the parking fees that we collect from parking permits and visitor parking. And then there's what we collect from the student transit fee. We do have a small amount of money that comes in from the city of Raleigh because Wolfline is an open door service, about $350,000 a year. We put that in to help go towards Wolfline. So if you look at our revenues and expenses, you can see that we take in about what we spend. There's not a whole lot left over. And what is left over, as Dr. Bowen explained, is that it rolls over. So it helps us to hold fees down in the long run. We maintain an ongoing 5-year budget to try to project out that far. So when we're doing those incremental increases over the years, we can get a picture of how that impacts our revenues so that we can pay our bills. As a part of our transit expenses, as you can see the green, that includes transload, it includes fuel, and it also includes mainly the contract. We have 10 years left on our contract with TransDev. They started 2 years ago, well, last year, and brought those 40 new buses. So our contract costs went up because we started a new contract and we had brand new fleet. Parking, on the other hand, is the purple. That includes not only our operations, but our maintenance and also what we put aside for our rainy day funds. The blue piece, the west deck debt, we are responsible for paying debt to. The west deck did get paid off this year, which was good news. It will save us a couple $1 million in the long run, but it depleted our reserves. And the reason we had to do that is the general administration was kind of sniffing around at reserves, and we said if we don't use it, we're probably going to lose it. So we made that decision to pay that off. Our total transit cost, as you can see, is most of it, like I said, is the contract, and then fuel, and then transload. About $1 of the transit fee that we collect generates $27,800 in revenue because it's based on an FTE projection. That varies every year. It depends on what the budget office gives us to estimate with, and then really at the end of the day, we have what we've collected, and it may or may not come up to that number. But one bus to put it on the street for the year costs us over $250,000. So that's a very impressive amount. So when we go forward with these fee increases, we're calculating mileage and hours to come up with what it's going to cost us to provide the services to the campus. Whoops. This is a very busy looking chart, but what we're trying to give you a picture of is over the years, you can see how student fees in the red have been offset by a growing gray, which is parking fees. When we have two sources of revenue. So if we don't get money from one source, we have to get it from the other. And yes, parking fees right now are making up over about 30% of what it costs to provide the Wolf Line service. This is up about 10% from what it normally has been. But like this year, when we're not having a transit fee increase, we're going to have to pull from our reserves and pull more from parking to make up that difference. If you notice the 205 and the 205 at the bottom is because we're not getting the increases this year. It's going to be the same this year and next year. We put NA because we don't know. We just don't know. That's going to be something we're going to have to work on together. And last but not least, just looking ahead for next year, like I said, no fee increase. That $250,000 we're going to have to pull from reserves to cover. Can't be something we do forever. We have got 5 new buses coming because we're going to expand our services between campuses. Pullen Road's going to open up. There's going to be more frequent service between main campus and Centennial campus. And also we're going to offer a free park and ride lot over at Centennial campus that will connect the two campuses. So that will give students and even employees an opportunity for close-in free parking with transit service if they choose not to buy a parking permit. Less than 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
Yay. Questions or later?
We've got time for a couple questions.
Couple questions? Oh, come on, I wasn't that good. Okay. All right, we'll be in the corner. Oh, sorry.
I realize parking is making up for a large percentage, but there was also a 40% increase in parking from last year to this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a lot. Is there a way to defray that kind of increase in the future? Or maintain?
Well, the only way to defray it is to not do things. So we would have to make the decision of either not providing transit services or not maintaining facilities. Like I said, we only have less than $1 million left over that we roll over. But at the same time, we're still getting demands for additional bus service because getting between campuses is important. But no, we're constantly looking for ways. And we do things like the license recognition program that we put in place. In the long run, that is going to save us money. The first year, about $70,000 because we didn't buy parking permits. So those are the sorts of things through operation improvements and technologies that we're trying to streamline our operations to save money. But we're open to ideas.
A similar vein of thought, you guys do like an audit on your bus system every year to say where are places being picked up, when are...
We do. Actually, monthly, we look at our routes. And that's where we make our tweaks based on that.
Is that made available to the public too?
Yeah. Go to the table, see Mike. No, right, the other Mike. Mike Kennan. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
We're going to pass around a microphone just to make sure everybody can hear as well.
So last year, I remember in the fees discussion, Coliseum deck was brought up and about how it's, kind of falling apart. I see that every day when I park there, and how it's going to be torn down and build a new one. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Oh, God, this is painful. Okay, the Coliseum deck was built in 1975, and it had faulty concrete when it was built, and the wall fell down my first year here in 1989. For $1 million, we sunk into that. That's when we first realized we need a reserve for maintenance. But fast forward. 2 years ago, we had an engineering study done saying in the next 5 to 7 years, the original section, that north half, 1,100 spaces, needs to go. To replace that in kind, not in that location necessarily, we've gotten estimates of $42 million. We do not have a money tree. So we've got to figure out how we're going to do that, or what we're going to do to solve the transportation problem, because it is a transportation problem, not just parking. So yeah, it keeps me awake at night, seriously. But we've got to decide how we're going to address that. Are we going to build a deck, or are we going to do surface parking somewhere, and how is it going to get funded? If that's transportation, that means we all pay for it. And unfortunately, you might be here for 4 years, but we're here for 10 and more, so we have to think that long range. So while it might impact you, we're thinking out longer range. We have to.
So if there's more questions for transportation, they'll be back here in the corner at the end of the period. Kathy, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I'll just yell because I don't have a microphone. So next is Julie Kasani with Health Fees. Student Health Service.
Fan clubs in the back, okay. So thank you. Thanks for having me here. So I'm going to talk about half of the student health fee, and then Monica Osborne from the Counseling Center will talk about the other half of the student health fee, because it does fund both of our centers. So, where are we? So I think that most of you have probably, hopefully, utilized student health, but I just wanted to go through some of the services that we offer at student health. So, you know about our primary care, women's health. We do allergy and travel clinics, which is open not only for school-based travel, but for students, even if you do family travel. It's also open to faculty and staff. Physical therapy on, this is all main campus, physical therapy, nutrition counseling, the pharmacy, laboratory, and x-ray. The things with STARS, the services with STARS, are things that we actually contract out to other providers to provide in our building. So we have Campus Smiles, dental services on main campus. And on main campus, 1 day a week, we bring in the specialties that we have the highest demand for referrals, and that is gastroenterology, orthopedics, and dermatology. So those are the services on main campus. Our other location is on Centennial, which we opened full-time beginning in October of this year after fall break. And frankly, it's underutilized as much as we would like it to be utilized. So if you have friends who are mostly over on Centennial campus, please tell them about this, because we really love it. It's a great facility. We have primary care over there for acute illness and injury. We also have physical therapy, which is almost always booked 100% to capacity. Campus Smiles is over there, and actually they have more patients over on the Centennial campus than they do on main campus. And then we do some of our nutrition counseling over there as well, because again, we want to deliver services where the students are. We don't want 6 students riding Wolfline. I'm sure Kathy is very happy about that. So anyway, we have our 2 locations. We also do, now, so those are the services that I think most of you think about when we think about student health. You come to the Student Health Center, it's a certified student health center, it's certified by the same organization that does your primary care providers back home and your family services. But we also do a lot of other things with student health, and we do a lot of wellness and outreach, including these activities. And so you'll see us around at all of the big wellness activities, all of the big days during orientation. We do over 100 orientation events during orientation 3 times a day. So a lot of outreach, trying to get our message out about wellness on campus. We also do campus public health, and this is a big part of the things that we do. So you know about the great norovirus outbreak last year. So we responded to that and tried to maintain it and contain it within Alexander Hall in this occasion. But we also do immunization compliance. So all of you came to campus, you all had to fill out your immunization statistics. We have to make sure that those immunizations comply with state law. So every single one of your records, over 7,000 a year, have to be reviewed to make sure that they're in compliance. And that's people that do that. We also make sure that if you have a particular exposure while you're a student here, while you're working here, for instance, with animals, especially over at the vet school, but there's a lot of other animal exposure on campus, we make sure that whatever immunizations or whatever medications you might need during that exposure you get. So we do a lot of rabies immunization, especially for the vet school. And then we have our vaccination campaigns a la in the corner. So if you haven't gotten your flu shot yet, please go get your flu shot tonight. And it's free, right? So we do our vaccination campaigns. And we're also prepared that if there are large outbreaks that require vaccination or medication on campus, we're prepared to do that as well. So that's kind of our public health role on campus. And it's a pretty important one because the students tend to be in close proximity to each other. So if there's any communicable disease, it rapidly spreads, like last year's flu episodes. So here are our student health visits. I wanted to give you a sense of who utilizes student health. About 40% of the students on campus utilize student health during their lifespan here. And these are the total number of visits. And what you can see in primary care is that there was an increase last year. That's partly because of our expanded services. It also has a lot to do with the flu episode that we had last year. And here's our physical therapy, women's health, and nutrition counseling numbers, just to give you a sense of how many there are. Oops, this is touchy. So we're here for student health fees, right? So what is it that student health fee pays for? Well, approximately 50% of our student health services budget is fee dependent. The other 50% is generated by revenue. So when you come into student health, your first visit is paid for. If you come to see me and you have a sore throat and I don't order any tests, that's paid for by your student health fee. There are no other charges. We do not bill insurance for that. If you need a test, if you need medications, if there's other things that you need related to that visit, then that will get billed to your insurance, and that insurance charge is then put back into us as revenue. If there's a copay that your insurance makes us charge you, then that gets put back into our revenue. So that's the other 50% of our budget. Our budget goes about 50 to 60% towards salaries. So we're a very people-driven organization, and so about 50 to 60% of our budget pays for people's salaries. Let's see what else I want to make sure I say. Okay, there are some visits that are out-of-pocket expenses that are not covered by your student fee. So if you're doing something like Peace Corps, or you're traveling and studying abroad and you need a physical exam that certifies that you're healthy in order to travel, that is a separate fee, and that's not covered by the student health fee. What about insurance? Everybody always asks me, what about insurance, Julie? It's going up so much. Okay, so we have, so just to make it clear, Student Blue, the student health insurance is negotiated at the university level, university system level. It's not negotiated by us directly. We input information to them. We tell them what services we need. We make sure that those services are covered to the best that we can. We also tell them how expensive student insurance is, and please, especially for graduate students who are on a limited income, this is really a hurt, and so can you please try to keep it as controlled as possible. So we are able to give inputs, but ultimately the decision is not ours. In other words, please don't blame us. We are also in network, and we do get to negotiate somewhat with most of the other big carriers like Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and United Healthcare. So we are in network. What that means is that we have negotiated a rate with them so that we know that we will get paid a certain amount when we put a charge in, and so we're very careful about that. So we try to keep those charges low so that students are covered, so that there's not a lot of charges going towards your deductible, which you will have to pay out of pocket. We don't have any control over the copay. That your insurance defines that, and it forces us to collect that. But we do need to understand that, because while we're talking to you in that therapeutic relationship and trying to negotiate with you what kind of tests you might need, which you will ultimately have to pay for, we want to make sure we understand what those copays are so that we can inform you about that, and helps you make decisions about what tests, the risk-benefit of those tests, right? The financial risk and benefit. So that's what we negotiate with insurance companies, and that's pretty standard for a health center. We do have some out-of-network insurance companies. It's a small percentage of students who are in out-of-network, and what that means is they're very small insurance companies. One big one that we work with is TRICARE, so if you are a military dependent or former military, we're not in network with them, but we have an agreement with them that they will pay us what other insurance companies typically pay us. So they're actually really good to work with for us. But there are some other small ones, so like Duke Blue. If you're a Duke employee, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, we are out of network with them, and so it's really difficult to negotiate what kinds of charges will be generated if you need lab tests or prescriptions. So that's how that works. So ultimately, our mission is to provide care, and so we want to do that. We love being in student health, and we want to help you get better and stay healthy. But there's challenges to that, and there will be challenges going forward. And unfortunately, some of them are fiscal. Because we have to balance what services we deliver. We have to remain adaptable to the student demands, to your health demands. The student population changes. We need to be aware of that. Medical technology changes. We need to be aware of that. We need to adopt those new technologies, and we've tried to do that. And so we need to be fiscally and financially viable in order to continue to deliver services. So that's the balance game that we're always playing. So I'm getting the hook. I'm going to turn it over to Monica, and she'll talk about the other half of student fee, student health fee, which is in the counseling center.
Thank you again for having us here tonight. I just want to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about the counseling center. Ooh, that is touchy. First, starting with services that we offer. We are a short-term model in the counseling center that is predominantly, as just going back to what Julie was talking about, being fiscally responsible and knowing that we can't provide the level of service that maybe all students need. But we do provide individual, group, and couples counseling at the center. All of the withdrawal review, academic counseling, career counseling, crisis response, and on-call services were available 24/7. We also do what we call postvention, so if there is an emergency or a crisis or even a death on campus, coming back to assure that the supports are in place for the university community. Psychiatry services, so psychiatric evaluations, medication management, medication refills, that type of thing. Consultation, we do this for student groups, students, friends, faculty, advisors, the entire campus. So we stay on call if anybody has a concern related to what's going on with a student, and sometimes we even oftentimes meet with students when mental health is impacting other areas of their life as well. Outreach and prevention, that is really about meeting students where they are. We want to spend a lot of time in prevention of crisis, so if we can spend the time on the front end teaching students skills or how to manage the stress before it gets to a really difficult level, and teaching those tools, we want to try and do that work for sure. And then case management and referral. When a student's needs are greater than what we can provide with our level of service at the center, we want to make sure we find them a good fit and find a counselor that's close to campus, that specializes in an area that they may need, and really making sure that students have the supports that are needed. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is just to give you an idea of the demand of the center. I started as the director of the Counseling Center in 2012, and my first year here, 2012-2013, we saw 3,833 unique students. That was the demand of what was coming into the Counseling Center. You can see how that's growing, but impact-wise, if you look at that last number, 3,819, that's just the number of students we saw in fall. So we've almost surpassed in that 6-year time span the same amount of students that we would see in an entire year. We now see that in a semester. That's a lot of students. And I'm really, really happy to say that we've gotten additional resources over the years to provide that level of service, because clearly there's a need. And the same slides related to appointments as well. And there, you can see the growth. We're on track for over 40,000 appointments. And I did check right before I left the office today for the number of students, unique students that we've already seen. We're at 4,157, so we've already surpassed that 4,000 mark. Again, I really like trend data and kind of looking to see where we're pacing and where the needs are. And just to give you a few snapshots, there was a 12% increase in students presenting to the Counseling Center with thoughts of suicide. I highlight this because basically what that means to us is there's about 665 additional students per year that we really need to spend intensive time with. They are not students that we're going to say, sorry, we're full, we're just not doing that. And these are students that need quality care and quality attention. So just thinking about it in that context of what that increase means. A 37% increase in demand for service. So our enrollment has kind of stayed the same, but our graduation and retention rates have increased. So there's less number of students on campus, which means there's technically less fee dollars coming in for us, and our demand has increased 37%. Don't ask me to explain it, I really can't. But it's definitely apparent. 13% increase in depression. You can see anxiety. Our wait times, I'm not proud of them, but I want to be honest with you. And also clear. There isn't a wait time to walk in and be seen, and you're going to be assessed, and we're going to make sure that students in a crisis are being attended to, absolutely. But unfortunately, what happens is when we experience this kind of volume, the folks who aren't in a crisis have to wait a little longer, and then sometimes that results in a crisis. Our fall, I hope it was an anomaly, but it was a 65% increase in wait time because our volume was just so high in the fall. And I'm going to stop there because I know that I'm running out of time, but I'm glad to answer any questions when we break into small groups. Thank you.
Next presenter is Tim Hogan. The next presenter is Tim Hogan, Student Center Operations.
Hi everybody, thanks for inviting me to present this evening. A couple short pieces. I'm the old guy. I have a fantastic team that works with me. Between us, we have over 80 years experience operating college unions. And those four are all young, so I don't know how we did that. One of the things that I'd like to share with you is that our department that runs the Student Center is nationally recognized. We've been selected previously by the Association of College Unions International, that's our professional association, to participate in a research study. There were 6 universities across the country that were selected to participate, and we were one of those. The goal was to study best practices in college unions documenting learning, engagement, and impact of physical space. In addition, from our previous slide, Dr. T.J. Willis was selected as a researcher by ACUI, and he actually performed research at a different university. Additionally, we have, since we've reopened Tally Student Union, we fully reopened in May 2015, have been inundated by our colleagues to come visit and see how we operate Tally Student Union. Currently, a few from the state of North Carolina that have actually had projects. They've started visiting us. East Carolina just opened a new student union. UNC is doing a study. NCA&T has opened a new student union. Delaware, Florida State, South Carolina are just a few of the number of groups that have come to visit us. Additionally, we have presented at national conferences on how we operate Tally Student Union, and so multiple times met with our colleagues at national conferences as well. Okay, just a short bit about our student fee. The Student Center's fees, the total fees that we saw before, are $373.80 per year. That gets divided roughly into 2 areas. The facilities area, which includes Student Center's operation, which is what I'm responsible for, Tally Student Union and Witherspoon Student Center, and then the Arts NC State facilities, Price, Thompson, and the Gregg Museum. Those are the facilities fees. And the programming fees, which are split up between Arts NC State, additional DASA programming, and a small portion to OID programming. So as you can see, out of that total fee, we account for about 27% of that fee to operate Tally and Witherspoon. Where we like to spend that money is making sure the facility is available for our students to have access to. So we provide flexible space. We're open 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to midnight. We think our campus takes pride in our university, and in Tally Student Union specifically. Recently, we just got a request from the Visitor Center on campus to attempt to relocate the Joyner Visitor Center operation from Joyner on Western Boulevard into Tally because of using Tally as an asset that helps us attract new students. I talked about ACUI, which is our Association of College Unions International. This is just a quickly point out that the role of the college union is what we ascribe to implement. When we had our study with a college union engagement study, the researchers looked at these 9 criteria that would be qualities displayed by a high-achieving student union. What I've attempted to do is I picked out a few of them and suggested how we attempt to spend our money, how we prioritize our spending to actually accomplish those goals. So just one example of complementing the academic experience. We spend money for our student employment program, and our research would suggest that student employment is a high impact practice that would help us in retention rates and persistence to graduation. Just a couple graphs here to show. The top one in red, our revenue is roughly, the majority of it is funded by student centers fees. What we've attempted to do over the last 5 years is reduce our dependency on student fees by attempting to generate other non-student fee revenue. And we've been mildly successful with that. If you look back in 14-15, our budget, 92% of our budget was made up of student fees. Currently, we've reduced that to 84%, and the trend is continuing to reduce. At the same time, in our event services portion of the Student Center, which is a large portion of what we do and where we spend a large money of our fees on student employees, is to implement events similar to this one. If you look at the same graph, 2014, we had about 6,500 reservations for events in the student centers, Tally and Witherspoon. Last year, over 18,000. This year, with the addition of us taking responsibility for reservations on outdoor space on campus, on main campus, we anticipate we'll get up to over 20,000 reservations per year. What that shows us that we're adding additional work and attempting to do that with other non-student fee revenue, as the top graph would show. Specifically, for events and event support, we have historically attempted to keep fees for student organizations as low as possible, and the fees for external organizations would be as high as we could do appropriately. And our concept is to attempt to generate fees from the organizations that use event space as much as possible. So one of the concepts we talked about years ago as we were establishing our fees to start with was user fees versus student fees. So we have a number of events, almost 20,000 a year that happen in buildings. So the ones that are more complex and more high profile, we might ask to spend a little bit more money. The ones that are regular run-of-the-mill student organization meetings that happen in the meeting rooms, we don't charge anything for. So that concept has worked well for us to date. A couple of, there used to be a picture there. A couple of recent projects that we've worked on. Witherspoon Student Center in the African American Cultural Center, we did a project with the AACC to redo their living room lounge space. In the cinema, we redid the seats and the lighting. Tally, those of you who may have been upstairs on the 5th floor, we did a renovation to the old UAB suite. That's where fraternity and sorority life has just moved in the last couple of months. We're working with Arts NC State to complete a rigging project in Stewart. We have additional work in Witherspoon on the horizon, and a larger to-be-determined project is on our radar. Should I wait? One question. Hi.
You mentioned that the percentage of revenue coming from fees has been decreasing, correct? Does this mean that the total revenue has been roughly the same? Or is there a correlation there?
The revenue has been increasing. What our goal has been, by showing that percentage of revenue becoming fees, we want to have less reliance on fees. So even though our costs continue to rise, because as Dr. Mullen said at the beginning, if we have to pay for raises, health insurance, if those costs are going up, the goal is to not have to ask for a student fee for every single cost increase that we get.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Hello. I'm still not on. Introduce yourself, young man.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Eric Cox. I have the best job on campus. I am your Executive Director of Wellness and Recreation, and I'm thrilled to be here. I got my clicker. So I like coming after my friends from Student Health. as you all know, our new name, Wellness and Recreation, has really shifted our thinking, and we've been doing it internally for a while, but I like the fact that we're now Wellness and Recreation because we know the value of what we typically know as the gym, right? And how much more it is than just the gym. And we really feel like we're on the front end, on the prevention side of a lot of the student health, mental health crisis that we're dealing with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and what we've been doing and where we're trying to go in the future. So again, for some of you who are not familiar with everything we do, here's our overview of our structure. We obviously have lots of water, we have some pools, we have lots of facilities. There's a big hole in the ground with some concrete and coming out of the ground, which we're all thrilled about, and I'll talk a little bit about that as our Wellness and Recreation Center is coming out of the ground finally. Our group fitness program, personal training, outdoor adventures, and you can read the rest, and I'm going to kind of go through them. So fitness, you all know we have lots of fitness center spaces. We have group fitness program, which is very, very popular. We have more than 80 classes a week. We have a little bit of everything. We have personal training programs, which again continues to be more and more popular. We have certified personal trainers that are available to work with you. I'm going to hit on a lot of the themes that you've already heard in terms of our ability to make revenue and make money that's not dependent on student fees. And personal training is one of those services that we've had quite a bit of success of. Sports programs, what that means to us is our club sports program. They are student organizations that fall under the umbrella of club sports. Very active. They're little intercollegiate athletic programs. They compete both locally and nationally. Intramural sports. Who's played intramural sports before? Show of hands. Good numbers, right? Intramural sports been going on forever. That's sort of like our history of collegiate recreation and wellness. But again, that's very, very active. Lots of folks are involved in team sports, racket sports, special events. Basketball, flag football, soccer are larger programs. Outdoor adventures, a couple different areas to talk about. We have an outdoor equipment rental area that you can come in and rent out whatever you'd like. If you want to go on a trip on your own. We have trips, if you would like to go on a trip, whether it be weekend trips, day trips, or some spring break trips are available all over the country. We have a challenge course. Anybody been at Shank Forest and gone through the team building? It's very, very cool. If you haven't taken an opportunity to do that, I would strongly recommend it. And then finally, we'll get to our Thrival, which is really that new wellness-specific program that's really trying to help out, support a lot of what our student health folks are dealing with. We have a wellness coaching program now. So in addition to, you may not be able to be seen in the counseling center, but if you are in a level where you just need to talk to someone, our clinicians, both at Student Health and the Counseling Center, can refer you over to our area and get wellness coaching. It's been tremendously effective. Lots of good things coming out of that. And then we just have lots of educational programming that goes on across campus, whether we come to you, whether we come to a classroom, whether we come to a student organization. And we're really trying to take this wellness thing and well-being thing campus-wide. So we're really, really excited about what that looks like and where we're going with that. Facilities, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. We've got a lot of them. A lot of them are old. We're trying to fix that. We're getting better every day. But there's a lot that goes into that. So what's our team look like? We've got 33 professional staff members, and then we've got over 650 student employees. And that's a great part of pride that we all take in. Because you all as students, the ones that work for us, you're the ones that make the machine work. Right? You all are the ones teaching group exercise classes, personal training sessions, intramural sports officials, right? So that's what they do. Just a little shot, we got 1.2 million visitors through Carmichael every year, even during construction. We see between 1,700 and 5,000 people per day. That first week of January is usually around 9,000 to 10,000, but that dips down, right? So I get it, right? We hope that they always show up, but they don't. So just so you know, we see about 68% of all students that have come through the building, and I'm using 17, 18 numbers. 90% of all students that live on campus use our facilities. 85% of international students use our facilities. And then our faculty and staff members, which I am one of, Dr. Mullen is one of. We have over 2,000 of those, and those are the folks that help support not increasing fees through our membership opportunities. So, Budget 101, right? This is what you're here to talk about. I want to kind of give you an overview. So we have two sources of revenue, student fees and then everything else. So your fees back in 17-18 were $167.35, and that generated about $4.8 million, right? We also generate about 1.5 of our own revenues, which are memberships, facility rentals, and then those specific area-specific personal training fees and some other things, which gives us a grand total of this almost $6.4 million operating budget. So that's kind of how we're funded. Expenses. Again, I shared this earlier, but our student employee development program is more than just a job, right? We're preparing people to be successful at transferable skills whenever you do get to the job market. And we're proud that we drop over $1.4 million of student wages back into student pockets, right? That's over 30% of the $4.8 million that you all provide us. So again, just a point of pride that we have. And we'll talk a little about the history. You can see 15-16 was the last pretty significant 3% increase we got. And we've been holding the line. And you've heard Tim share earlier, and we've been able to hold this with little to no increases because we've been very active trying to increase our non-student revenue generating opportunities. Through membership drives, we've got better facilities, we've got better programs, the personal training opportunities, and our team continues to look for those opportunities. So we know, right, we've gotten those mandated increases that are all funded through student fees, or salary increases that we weren't able to fund through student fees, but we were able to do it because we need to continue to attract the top talent to make sure that we provide you with the best programs and services available. So what are we looking forward in the future? Number one, I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again, we got to continue to look for generating more money, not on the backs of students, okay? Number two, we're going to continue to look for efficiencies. Dr. Zapata and Mike Mullen, Dr. Mullen, they are like, every time we have a position that goes away, a full-time person, we're always looking to figure out how can we do something different to better meet our needs of our organization. So we're always going to continue to do that with all of our areas. And then the big one I want to share is the Wellness and Recreation Center impact. That's a big deal, right? I don't know exactly what the demand is going to look like in the future, and I'm going to say that openly, right? We're going to open up this new building. As Tim shared about Tally being an asset to the university, the Wellness and Recreation Center is going to be another tremendous asset for us. And I think what that looks like, we don't know. We're going to go down that path together. We're under construction right now. We know that we've got things that we're going to be peeling off of and using with our operating budget. And again, what does that new programming look like? So again, I know you can see the building. I'm just going to show you some pictures of what it's going to look like. It's going to be more than just a pit soon. But the steel is going to start coming up in the next few months. And then in the fall of 2020, we'll be opening up pretty cool building. So I think I did all right on time. Yes, any questions? And I'm going to be around too, so yes. Oh, I know exactly how it's going to be used. My comment about what it's going to look like, what the new demands are going to be, we're excited about it. I think the problem that we're going to have is like, you're going to want to have the climbing wall open all day long. But we may not be able to do that, right? Because we only have so much resources available to us. So I think what that demand is going to look like is, we'll see. We will build it, and we're going to do our best, and we're going to continue to look for ways to make everything happen. But it's exciting for us. It's a good challenge to have.
One more question. Meredith?
Thank you for that. So a frequent concern that I hear from the graduate student perspective is that almost all graduate students are here over the summer but not enrolled for classes. Yeah. I know they can access these facilities through an additional summer semester fee, but is there any opportunity to make it to where graduate students that are here over the summer could access that without the additional fee? Because I know a lot of the undergraduate students are enrolled in classes if they're here over the summer, so they already have their fees being paid and can access these facilities.
Yep, I get all those inquiries too. And honestly, for me, it comes down to a university-wide decision that I would, if somebody would say, let's try to do this and let's make that happen, it all comes down to financially. What makes the graduate students different than the undergraduates? And if we were to let everybody have access, then we would need to ramp up fees somehow to cover those dollars. So I hear you. There's no easy answer for this one. It's a tough system, and again, graduate students get a tough one more than in this one situation. But I'm always open to having the conversations. I just don't know how you make the numbers work in the university to be okay with what we do. Good question, though.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
I think I'm last. Oh, I'm working. So I'm gonna finish up by talking about the educational and technology fee, oftentimes called the education and technology fee, but educational is actually the right description if you look at the UNC policy manual. This particular fee is kind of an anomaly because it's the one fee that is actually dedicated to the academic side of the house, and that was actually put in place by the Board of Governors and the UNC system in the early 2000s because of the proliferation of course fees. So a lot of universities, you go to a chemistry class in your freshman year and you pay a $240 fee. You go to a biology class, it's $180. You go to an engineering lab, it's $375, whatever that is. And so the ETF fee was put in place to do two things. One, it was hoped that it would consolidate those course fees, which have largely disappeared on campus. There's still, I think, some places where they pop up in certain programs. But it was also then put in place to offset the ever-rising costs of educational technology on our campuses. So how many of you appreciate your Wi-Fi? There you go. Big chunk of your Wi-Fi is paid through the educational and technology fee, unless you're living in a residence hall, in which case you're paying a different fee for access there. So what is the ETF? In real brief, it's just this. It's a fee that's used to provide specialized instruction, supplies, and services. And so again, if we didn't have the fee, you'd be paying that $300 for your chemistry lab. Because you break stuff, you use chemicals, you use other kinds of supplies, that money needs to come from somewhere, and there's just not enough tuition and appropriation money to cover that. IT all over campus, Wi-Fi, computer labs, you name it, Mediascape for recording lectures in a lot of the classrooms on campus, all comes in there. So the Office of Information Technology gets a pretty big chunk of this money every year to maintain the Wi-Fi system and the network systems on our campus for student use. A variety of other equipment and services. So I used to teach soils. About every other year I'd have to buy all new pH meters, and occasionally I'd buy a flame photometer or whatever the case might be. I can use these kind of monies for those kinds of purchases. And then other kinds of things like field trips. So how many of you take field trips in your classes? Nobody? Got some CALS folks here. Yeah, I know you got to take some field trips in CALS. But that's one example of how the fee could be used in other ways. And then personnel, and you'll see in a minute that the personnel costs are fairly high because you got to run the university and run this backbone. So a big chunk of the OIT or information technology staff have some part of their salary paid. If you have a college-based computer lab that has a computer tech that runs it, salary's probably on this and so forth. But we don't pay faculty to teach. That money comes out of appropriated funds in your tuition fund. So as a professor, I don't get salary dollars out of this, but I do get dollars for helping to maintain the labs that I teach or the other kinds of services and activities we do in our classroom, or maintaining classroom tech. So most colleges have classrooms that are theirs. They're maintaining the projectors, they're maintaining the computers, they're maintaining the screens, whatever the case may be. So these are the kinds of allowable uses. I am not going to read this slide to you. By the way, all the slides will be available for tonight on the student government website. Alex will say more about that in a few moments. But you can see how these expenses kind of break out. And so that's, it's pretty exhaustive. There's always an exception to this list that invariably Barry Olson will get a phone call in August and say, hey, can we use the money for this particular purpose? And so we have to have a conversation. Does that actually meet the spirit of the ETF fee? This kind of is how it's spent. So the total fee that you pay a year is $439.28 for a full-time undergraduate or graduate student, not counting summer sessions. About 36% is personnel and benefits. 36% is supplies and materials, running those labs. Current services might be year-to-year memberships, not memberships, subscriptions, rentals, those kinds of things. So things that we're going to pay for this year, but we only pay one at a time from an outside vendor. And then we have fixed charges, which are long-term contracts. And it might be equipment contracts. It could be a variety of things. So that's where most of the money gets spent. Capital outlay, anything that we buy that costs more than $5,000. So I buy that flame photometer for $27,000 or whatever it is. Haven't bought one in 15 years, so I don't know. But that would be a capital outlay. If I buy a pH meter for $873, that's supplies and materials. So that's kind of how the money would be spent. So that's where your ETF fee goes. Every college gets a base allocation. And then there's another chunk of money. The total is about $13 million. And that gets spread, about 9 of that gets spread out across the colleges. And then well, that includes OIET, their chunk too is in that $9 million. Then we do some one-time allocations to colleges, or if there are special things that we need to do. So a couple of years ago, we spent money from the leftover pool to get more Mediascape sites across the campus so that we could actually record lectures. So those are the kind of one-off kinds of things. We've been using a little bit to supplement tutoring and a couple of other kinds of areas as well. So that's kind of how the fee is used. It's a large fee. It's one of the largest fees on most campuses, except for those campuses that are charging $800 for athletics. But most of them are in the $300 to $440 range at all the campuses across the system. Not a very common fee at our peer institutions. This is kind of a North Carolina thing, and that's just grown up in the last 18 years or so. So that's the ETF fee. I probably have a moment or two as well, but let me say a few things about process before I go away. I didn't mention it earlier. When we talk about the fee process, the fee areas are talking right now about what is it going to look like in the fall of 2020. And so those conversations are just starting. And so over the next several months, the counseling center, student health, transportation, WellRec, UAB, you go down the list. We'll be working on what does it look like next year? What do we need if we're going to maintain services? Are there new services we need to think about? So that starts now. That really doesn't finish up until the middle of the summer. And that's a really laborious process. It goes through multiple levels of review all the way up to the associate vice provost for finance and budget in the Division of Finance and Administration. Look at every line item. What are we spending the money on? How did we spend the money last year? And then in the middle of the summer, we finally kind of finalize those. And it's interesting. A lot of times we'll actually in March say we're going to have a fee of $18. And by July, we will have looked through this and said, well, we got to figure out some more economics here. We want to keep the total fee level down. That fee might drop to $14 or $11 as we continue to work through the iterative cycle on those particular fees. And then at that point, once we get those all in place, there's still no guarantee it's going to end up that way. We have a fee review committee. It's co-chaired by myself and the president of the Student Senate. And so there's actually 4 students on the committee and 5 faculty staff, a couple faculty members, a couple staff, including the financial aid director, Krista Ringler. And then we go through the fall from really August through early October, kind of vetting those fees, except this year when it took us 10 minutes because we didn't do any fees. And then usually culminating with a late September. Those of you who've been around a long time, a late September Student Senate extravaganza where we go from 7:30 or 8 o'clock until, in my experience, anywhere from 11:30 to 1:45 in the morning to kind of talk about the fees and see where we're going to end up. And then it goes back to the committee, the 9 members vote, we talk about each of the fees again. And then it goes to the chancellor, we reconcile fees and tuition, then it goes to the Board of Trustees in November here. And then when they're done, it goes to the system, the Board of Governors will approve it in February or March. And then the legislature has to pass their budget before we can do anything. So it's really a 1.5 year process to kind of guess where you're going to be the following year. So I just wanted to put that on the table. The slides will be there. Flu vaccines over here. Yes. Folks are in the back, and I want to bring Alex up to close the show. Oh, I didn't give any time for questions of me, but I'll be around.
Hi everyone, my name's Alex. I just wanted to come up here and thank all of our presenters tonight for coming and talking to all of you. And thank you for all attending. Being involved in the student fee process is really important. So thank you to all of you for opting in to learn more about where your money's going. The event isn't over yet. Stick around, get your flu shot. There's some food over here on your left side that you can grab, and walk around and ask any remaining questions that you may have. After the event, you should get a survey within the following days, as well as we will attach all the slides to the email, and we will also try to get those put on the SG website in case it doesn't go in your email inbox, but it should. So yeah, thank you all again for coming, and I hope you stick around.